Forgot to record. Okay, very good.
There we go.
Yeah. All right, so let me just quickly review. This is our project 2. Um, and for the sake of the recording, this is what we're going to be covering today. Review of shadowing in CSS, and then project 2, CSS. We'll continue our project 2. All right. This is what it should look like right now. This is what the code looks like right now. So we should have a head section, a body section. In the head section, we should have a title that includes your name, something like David's calculator. Inside the body tags, we have a div, and then we have a form inside that div. So the div is like a container for the form. And then the inputs of the form basically are functioning or serving as our buttons in our display. So this is just a snippet of the code again. I wouldn't put the full code on here because it won't fit on one slide. So basically, we're just using the special properties of forms to create something that does not look like a form, but uses very similar logic to a form. We're basically inputting values, and then just like a form will process the inputs, the calculator will process our inputs. The big concept for this project is how we're using the onClick attribute and the eval function to basically create the calculation function, the calculation operation. And then an even bigger concept is how we use CSS to make it look appealing to the eye. All right, so to make it easier to follow along, we'll quickly start by reviewing and extend our knowledge of shadow effects. So shadow effects are very often used to create visual effects, but they can be a bit tricky to understand. So let's practice by coding this up. Let's just code this up really quickly, and you should get a page that looks something like this, and we'll explain more about that later on. But let's go ahead and practice by coding this up so you can follow along. You can use whatever text editor you like, and just let's code this up really quickly, and I'll go ahead and start doing that also. All right, so if I want to code this up, I'm going to open up a text editor. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to name it as HTML. So I'll save this as, or I just have to save it because it's a new text document. I don't have to do save as. And I'll save it as, I always like the date, 5/11. And then I like P1, like practice 1 dot HTML. And then I have to change it from type txt to all files. And then I'll go ahead and I'll save that on my desktop. I'll save that on my desktop. Very good. Now let me start coding. Or before I even start coding, let me pull that up and well, let me start coding first since we already have that slide up. So we're gonna start with our div ID. We're gonna give it an ID equal to box1. And then we're just gonna say I am box1 inside of that. And we'll close off the div. And we're gonna copy that and do the same thing. The next one is gonna be box2. And then that's basically it. We're gonna start our style. Our CSS. So for a CSS, first thing we want to do is we want to give the body a display property of grid because we want the I'll show you what that looks like later on. For now, let's just focus on other CSS. Let's focus on the background of the boxes. For box1, I want the background to be, I want that to be yellow so we can actually see it. And I'll just use gold because yellow is the same thing as gold basically. And I'll give it a height because you have to be able to see, in order to see a div, the div has to have at least a width. Let me go ahead and mute you. We don't have too much background noise. So the height is going to be 200 pixels. And then the width is also going to be 200 pixels. And then I think that's all we need to do. We'll do the box shadow. Yeah, we'll do the back shadow actually later on. Um, let's just focus on getting the boxes done. So that's for box one. And now let's do box two. Just copying and pasting. And then same color. Um, and now let's go ahead and save that and let's go ahead and show that on the screen. Go ahead and pull that up. Let's see. This is gonna be 5, 11. Okay, very good. So this is what it looks like so far. When we pull it up in our web browser, we have a div, a box one, and then a box two. And right now you can see that they're just stacked on top of each other because a div is a block element, so it's always going to be stacked vertical. So if we want this to be spaced out, we're going to use a display. We're going to do display. We'll just do like a grid. That's just going to make it spaced out for us. And I'll explain more about, grid styling later on. If I refresh that, it spaces it out for us very nicely. So we can at least see where the first box ends and where the second box begins. Now we'll add our shadows. And you can see the shadow still there at the bottom of this slide. Let's just move this to the side a little bit so you can see that very well. So for the first shadow, we'll do a box shadow of 0, 5, 15, and 0. So now let's go back to our slides and let's see what that means. Before we add any shadows, let's just make sure we review what we're doing when we're adding a text shadow. So, or when we're adding a box shadow. So, whenever we're having a box shadow, so here are two boxes. So the box shadow property, again, is kind of weird. So because it's weird because it can take 2 to 6 values. It can take anywhere from just 2 values to 6 values. So at the minimum, you must specify a horizontal offset and a vertical offset with the box shadow property. So at minimum, you need these 2 values, the horizontal and the vertical offset. And then everything else is optional. Which is kind of crazy because there's a lot of optional like values for the box shadow. So if you don't specify anything else, by default, the color will be the same as the text color, except on Safari, which is just so annoying because Apple basically just likes to be different or annoying. So it looks, they're the only browser that I know of where by default the text color, the box shadow color is not the same color as the text color. Anyway, so most of the time, you'll be specifying 5 values like so. Like as you can see right here, you'll be specifying these 5 values the vast majority of the time when you use the shadow property, the box shadow property. After the horizontal and vertical offsets, the third value is the blur. And then the fourth value is the spread of the shadow. So the value of the blur basically defines how far it will take for the shadow to go from full to 0, kind of like a gradient. So 15 pixels basically means it's going to use 15 pixels to slowly go from to slowly decrease the shadow to 0, to go from a full shadow to a 0 shadow. So it's kind of like a gradient. And then the spread defines the minimum size the shadow will be before any blurring begins. So if you set it to 0, that means the blurring is going to begin immediately. But if you set it to like a 7 per pixel spread, that means the shadow will be at minimum 7 pixels. Then after 7 pixels, it's going to start to sort of blur, if there is a blur at all. So for example, if this was 7 and this was 15, it would go 7 pixels and then slowly blur for the remaining 15 to 0. So spread basically increases the size of the shadow. And then the color is pretty self-explanatory. Just that's the shadow color. Most of the time, you're going to be using a black shadow color because that's what we normally see in real life. And then again, by default, the color if it's not specified, is the text color except on Safari. By default on Safari, it's transparent. All right, so let's quickly practice that. So here we go. Now let's add our shadow property. So to add our shadow property, all we need to do is under box one, we'll do let me move this out of the way so we can see it more clearly. Let me shrink this a little bit too. So we'll do for box one, we'll do box shadow, and we'll do 0 pixels, 5 pixels. Again, 0 is our horizontal offset, and then 5 pixels is our vertical offset, and then 15 pixels is going to be our blur. And then we don't want any spread. We want it to start blurring right away. We don't want it to be like any kind of pause. So the spread is going to be 0 pixels. We want the blur to begin right away. RGBA, we're going to use our color of just 0. Again, A is going to be for opacity. Opacity, we're going to give it a 50% opacity or 0.5. And that's going to be our shadow for the box one. Let's save that and let's see what that looks like. And you can see box one now has that shadow on it. Now let's duplicate that for box two. Just going to copy that, paste it in for box two. And now let's save that. And we should see a box shadow on both of them. Very good. So that's looking good. Now let's go ahead and explore further. So that's all we need to do for this part is just add box shadows to those two boxes and it looks correct. All right, so now the sixth, you might be wondering, where's the sixth value? So we've sort of, you probably counted, you might have counted and noticed that this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values. Where's the sixth value? I said before, the box shadow can take anywhere from 1 to, or 2 to 6 values. So let me quickly show you also what it would look like if we just had 2 values. So by default, we could just have 2 values. Let's just get rid of all of this and just leave it as that. And you'll see that the shadow, if I save this for box one, the shadow is still there. It just looks a little bit funky, but it does still there. It still exists. And we can make this 5 pixels, and you'll see it a little bit better. You can see that, you know, just with 2 values, you still get a box shadow. So at minimum, you always need the horizontal offset and the vertical offset, and all the other values are optional. And let me demonstrate again that by default, the color is the text color. So if I put the color of the text on the body as like red, you might think that the shadow color is always black by default, but no, it's always the text color. So if I set the color of the text to red in the body, for the body, now if I refresh it, you'll notice that the shadow is actually red because the shadow by default is whatever the text color is, except on Safari again. So all right, let me save that. And let me go back actually to the original shadow, which has all 5 values that we're going to be using. Let me save that, refresh, and very good. So now, again, you might be wondering, where's the 6th value coming into play? So now we'll look at the 6th value. The 6th value is basically this little like initial value called the internal or inset value, or you could also call it the external or outset value. So by default, the first value is outset because we can change, but we can change it to inset if we want to create like an inverted or sync effect. So I'll just quickly show you what that looks like. It's a little bit strange, but that first value can be inset or outset, and that's our 6th value. So if we change this to inset, and we pull up our HTML and refresh, you'll see that now it's sort of inset. it looks like it's a sink. Like the shadow is like sinking into, it's a kind of shadow you'd get if the box was sinking into the page. Let's do that for the other one too. So that's what that sixth value basically controls. It's inset or outset. By default, it's always outset. You can also see that the shadow for inset is always below the text. We'll talk more about that later, but it's always below the content of the HTML. So this is what that sixth value does. It makes the shadow inset or outset, right? So now we'll look at one more thing. We can also stack shadows on top of each other. So just like we can with background images, we can stack shadows. And whenever we stack shadows, a comma is used in between the lower and the upper shadow. So whenever we're stacking shadows, we'll just put a comma instead of a semicolon at the end of the first shadow property or shadow value, and then we'll just define another one right after that. So the first shadow that we specify is going to be our lowest shadow, and this second one will be on top of it. If we had three, it would go like bottom, middle, top. So as you add commas, the subsequent shadows will be above the ones that are in the beginning. So that's sort of the order of the shadows. Let's just quickly practice that. So let's add additional shadow. We can add, again, we'll put a comma at the end of this one. And let's change this from being inset to being regular for box one. And then let's add an inset shadow. After that, let's make the inset shadow 0 pixels, -100, 1 pixel. Or we don't even need a spread. Let's just leave the spread out. That's fine. And then let's just do RGBA. Same thing, 0.5 or 50%. And then we'll terminate that. So let's save that and see what that looks like. Very good. You can see it gives it an effect almost like I don't know what, like a shine. It almost looks like there's sort of, it's like a shadow on the actual box itself. So you can stack shadows that way. So this has an outer shadow, of course, and now it has sort of an inner shadow also, and it gives it like an effect like it's almost like a roof sort of thing. So that's how you can stack shadows, and you can do a lot of cool stuff by stacking shadows in CSS. Right, very good. And now, one last thing before we get into our final practice is that with CSS, we can add depth. Whenever we want to add depth, the most important value that we want to change is the blur. And that might be a little bit counterintuitive. People think it's usually like the size or the spread. But anytime we want to add depth, all we really need to do is change the blur. And that affects our perception of depth far more. Let's just quickly look at that. So this is a little bit of physics, but if we want to affect our depth perception of the shadow, the most important thing we need to actually change is the blur of the shadow. Let me just quickly demonstrate that. So let's save this. It's actually, yeah, it's a little bit of optics. So let me change this from inset to regular. Okay, very good. If I want to make this box one look like it's coming closer and closer out of to you out of the page, all I need to really do is change the blur from 15 pixels. Let's make it say 45. If I save that, you'll notice that it looks like it just came out more towards you. So the blur is really the only thing we need to change. You could also actually change the color of the shadow. That also affects it. For example, if I make this 0.35, it's gonna make it look a little bit more dramatic. But usually it's actually just the blur. just by changing the blur, that powerfully affects our depth perception. Because we normally, if you just practice this by looking at something and moving it closer to you, you'll notice the shadow gets blurry as you move the object closer to you. So the blur affects our depth perception most strongly of all the properties that we of the box shadow. And let's see what that looks like with inset also. If you make this inset, you notice the same is true. It looks like this box one is deeper in the page than this box two. This box two looks like it's right close to the page. This box one looks like it's sinking deeper into the page. So the inset or the blur has the same effect for inset shadows also. It adds to the depth effect of your eyes. Right, very good. Okay, so now let's go ahead and now that we understand shadows a little bit more clearly, let's get back to project two and start adding our CSS. So the first thing we're going to add, this is our project two at this point. Again, let me just pull that back up. So let me pull back up our code from project two. Let me pull that back up. Let's see. So let's do this. There we go. Okay. All right, very good. So this is our project one CSS, or this is our project one HTML so far. So we'll go over the CSS piecemeal. Let me actually just delete all the stuff that I've done so far so we can start fresh. Okay, so this is where we're at so far from last week. So if I save this and we look at our project, the same file, P11, this is what we get. So this is where we were at last week. We haven't added any CSS to this. So let's go ahead and first start by adding our background color. So our background image, actually. So to do that, we're going to go to our web browser. We're going to go to ChosenGen. RCCG chosengen.org. You can also just Google to make it easy. You can just Google Chosen Generation. Go to google.com and Google RCCG Chosen Generation at Casa Grande, and then it's going to pop right up on Google. And then we want to go to the website, and we want to grab the background. Basically, it's the main background of the website. We'll keep it simple. We'll just grab the background of this website because we're familiar with it already, and it's a colorful background. It's taking a while to load. Anyway, in the meantime, we can start our style tags. We can do style, and then we can close off our style tag. Okay. So now we've got our style section ready to go. So now we want to grab that background, and we want to inspect it using our dev tools. And then when we inspect it, it gives us, you can see it gives us two images. One of them is a logo. We'll grab the logo actually too. Since we need both of them, we might as well grab the logo first. So let's go ahead and copy the URL. Let's copy that. And then we'll just paste it into our syntax here, and we'll save that. Let's comment it out so it doesn't interfere with anything. And then the same for the background. Let's go back. So we want the actual background. In order to get that background, we're gonna have to be like just careful with what we actually select. We'll click on the arrow and we'll try to select that background only. There it goes. So we selected the background, and now we can see that there's an image file here. And if we hover over it, it shows us what the actual image is. And we can see that that is the background that we want. So we can just click on it. Well, we can either click on it that way, or we can hover over the link here. So what I'm doing is I'm hovering over it, and then I'm just moving the mouse up to click on this actual link that's going to open up the actual image in a new tab. It opens it up in a new tab. Now I can copy the URL or the address for the background image, and I can also paste that here to save it. And what you can also do is download these. Let me show you also you can download them. I can save this image onto my machine. So I'll save it onto the desktop to make it easy. So I'll just call it like image1 to make it easy, img1. And then let me do the same actually for the other background. Or I'll reference the other background, the original one, using the address, because that's probably the more reliable way. For speed, you might want to reference it on your actual like machine, on your computer. So I'll show you both methods. So okay, very good. That's how you grab the URL, and that's how you download it. So now let's go ahead and add those backgrounds. So we want to use CSS to add those backgrounds. We're going to do, we're going to add it on the body. So for the entire body, we'll add this background. So we're going to do a width of, well, actually, let's just add the backgrounds first. Background, and then URL. That's going to be our first URL, which is going to be, we called it image1. So let's just verify. Well, this is already on our desktop. Let's see what happens if we just do this. img1.jpg. Because it's already on our desktop, we should be able to just do that and be able to grab the first image on the background. Because it's on our desktop, so the location is the same location as this actual document. So we should be able to reference that location with just the name of the file. If it was inside of a folder, we'd have to put like the folder name first or something like that. If it was inside a folder called like images, we'd have to do like something like this. But it's just on the desktop. Both files are on the desktop, so we should be able to just reference it by the name. And then our second image is going to be right here, the logo. I'm just cutting that, and I'm going to paste that. Now I can delete the comment. And then I'll close off my rule. That's my background so far. Let me just save that. Let me check to see what happens. Let's see how it looks so far. Very good. So it did pull that background correctly. And do I have my logo? I don't see my logo. So it got the background image1, but for some reason I don't see the logo. Oh, that might be because it's off the page. Okay, that's fine. So let's play around with that by centering, by repositioning these logos or these images. So to position them, first thing we want to do is set no repeat. We don't want the background to repeat. So we'll use the background property of, or background repeat property, and set that to no repeat. And then we'll set the background position. Now for background position, we're going to set the position of both of them. So for the first one, the position is going to be, we'll just say it's going to be horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical. So let's make the first one, which is the background, the Grand Canyon or the canyon scene. Let's say that's a 50% horizontal. Actually, the logo should be the first. That's why we don't see it. Okay. That's why we don't see it. The logo should be on top. My mistake. So the logo, that's why we're not seeing the logo at all, because the logo is actually behind of that background. So we want the logo to be on top, and then we want the mountains to be below that. So that's how you would do it. Whatever is first, remember, is going to be on top, and then what's second for the background property, that's how the order that it goes. It's like on top, then below, and below. So it's not like with the box shadow. So let me refresh this. Oh, before I refresh that, I have to actually clean this rule because it's not going to work if I don't make it correct. Let's refresh. Very good. Now you see that logo there on top. Okay, now we can go ahead and proceed. So background position. We want to specify the position of the top logo of the top background and then of the second background. So for the top background, we want that to be 50%, like halfway in between the page, basically. And then we want it to be 20% from the top of the page. So our horizontal location is going to be 50%, our vertical location is going to be 20% from the top. And then for our second one, we just want that to be at the top left corner of the page. So 0 pixels and then 0 pixels. It's fine. We can use percentages or pixels or other units also that we'll get into maybe later on. So let's go ahead and save that and let's see what that looks like. Very good. Now the background is centered, but this logo is too big. Let's go ahead and change the logo size. We'll use the background size property. And we'll set the logo to be 300 pixels wide. And whenever we just use one value, that height will automatically be scaled. So we can like give it height and width, but if we just give the width, then the height will automatically be scaled. The first value is always for the width. So we'll just leave that alone and let it scale the height for us automatically. And then for the actual background, the mountains, we'll use the special name cover. And cover is going to tell it to basically cover the entire page. So we'll save that. We can give it we can do 100%, 100%. It will have the same effect. It would have the same effect of doing this. So we'll just use the special keyword cover. Cover the whole page. We'll save that and let's refresh. And very good. So now the background covers the page. And then you see that logo appears 20% from the top and then halfway in from the left of the page. All right, very good. So our background is looking good. Now we'll actually move on to the calculator. And we want the calculator, first of all, to be well, let's see what's our ID. How are we grabbing the calculator? We gave it an ID of calc. So it has a container call with a class of container, but we really need to just focus on the form itself because the form is the actual calculator. So we'll grab the calculator by using the ID tag, and the ID is calc. So we want to style the calculator, and the first style will apply. Or 1, 2, and it's going to be the width. We want this to be a width of 200 pixels. Let's save that. Okay, very good. And the calculator is a form, so it doesn't really have that much of an effect by giving it a width. And then we want the padding to be, we're going to use the shorthand for padding. We want it to be, remember, it's terrible. So T for the top padding will do 8 pixels. And then right padding will also do 8 pixels. And then bottom will do 20 pixels. And then for the left padding, we'll do 8 pixels also. So we'll save that. We'll see what that looks like. Very good. I moved it a little bit. And then the big thing we'll do is now the background color. We'll give it a background color. Oops. We'll do just like a gray. And for gray, it's always like alternating letters. I forgot to mention that hexadecimal, we all know that for RGBA, the first value is red, the second value is green. Like for RGB, the first value is your red, and the second value is your green, and the third value is your blue. So if you do 0, 0, 0, that's always going to give you black because it's zero green. Basically, it's no color at all. And then 255, all colors, is going to be maximum red, maximum green, and then maximum blue, which is always going to give you white. So maximum of all the colors is always going to give you white. So now, if we want to basically do a gray, we can use hex code to do the same effect by when we're using hex, the first two values are the red, and then the next two values are like the green, and the next two values are the blue. So that's why hex is always 6. It's always 6 characters long. So whenever we want to do a gray, it would be like wanting to do something like this. Whenever we want to do gray in RGB, we basically just do like the same colors for all the red, green, and blue. We do like 100, 100, 100, and that's going to give us gray. Let's just do that really quickly. I'll show you that gives us gray. That gives us a gray shade of gray. So now, to create another shade of gray, we can just make it like simple and use hex codes, and we'll just do A B A B A B. A B. So the first 2 pixels are for the red, and then again the first 2 hex values, that is, are for the red. The second 2 hex values are for the blue, and the last 2 hex values for the green. So if we save this, we should also get a shade of gray. And very good, we get a shade of gray. So that's going to be our background for the calculator. All right. Now we'll do a margin. We want it to be 300. We want to position this sort of in the middle of the page. So we'll do a margin of 300 pixels. Again, we're using the shorthand, so this is terrible. T is going to be the first one. So the margin is going to start with the top, 300 pixels from the top, and then auto for the right. We just want it to be as far right as possible, and then which is going to basically end up centering it if you do the same for the left. From the bottom, we want it to be 0, and then for the left, we want it to be auto also, which is going to have the effect of centering it for us in the middle of the page. So let's go ahead and save that and refresh. And it centered it for us. So whenever we set auto again, auto is basically telling it use the full available space. So it's kind of like the same as 100% whenever we use auto. So okay, very good. The calculator is now in the middle of the page. So now our next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a let's see. We already did our padding. Let's go ahead and add our border radius. We want the border of this calculator to not be like sharp. We want to give it a border radius. And for the border radius, we're just going to do uniformly 4 pixels for everything to keep it simple. We'll save that. Let's refresh. Very good. And then now we're going to do something that's a little bit cool. We're going to start to give this an effect of like depth. So to give that a depth effect, we're going to give the top border a different color, almost like light is shining on it. So we're going to do border top because we have fine control with the border property of the top, right, bottom, and left. So we're going to just follow along with like the terrible sort of acronym. We're going to start with the top. We're going to give it a color of 2 pixels. I'm going to make it solid, or we're going to give it a depth of 2 pixels, or width of 2 pixels. We'll make it solid, and then we're going to give it a color of white, or FFF. We can do 6 Fs, or just do 3 Fs, and that's by default. If we do 3 Fs, we're basically telling it, use F for the first 2, use F for the second 2, use F for the last 2. That's how we can just use 3 values also for hex codes. So we'll do this for border right. We'll do a solid 2 pixel border again. And then we'll give it a color of gray. This will be a different gray, C1, C1, C1. And then for the left border, we'll give it a solid 2 pixel border also. And then we'll do the same gray. And let's go ahead and see what that looks like. Oh, we forgot our bottom. Terrible. TRBL. Border bottom. And we want that to be 2 pixels solid also. And we'll also make that gray. Let's save that and see what that looks like. Very good. You see how it gives that edge effect that we saw in our slides. So we saw that. Let me just quickly show you what we're trying to get at. So we're trying to get to this. Let me move this out of the way. You see how it has that edge effect, right, at the very top. So we're trying to get to that. So that's how we're achieving that effect, by giving it actually a white border on the top. And then the left side, we're giving it like a light gray. And then also the bottom, we're giving it a light gray. So, all right, very good. Actually, for the right border, we should give it white. I just caught, by looking at that, I just actually caught myself. This should be white also. Let's save that. Very good. So now it looks more like the image. Yeah. Okay, very good. So now we have the sort of skeleton of the actual form done. Now we'll look at the display. So to grab the display, we're gonna go and what do we call the display? What ID did we give that? Okay, very good. We just gave it an ID of display, which makes it easy. So that makes it easy to grab the display. So we'll just grab the ID display. Now we'll style the display. So we want the display to, we'll start by giving it a background color. And we'll just give it a background color of white. And that really doesn't do anything right now. That's fine. And now we'll actually give it a width. We'll give it a width of 174. And we'll give it a height of 42. Okay, let's see what that looks like. Very good. All right. Now we'll go ahead and give it we'll give it a display block, because we want it to be yeah. Actually, we'll do that last. That's fine. So let's give it a margin now. We want it to be 15 pixels from the top, and then all the rest of it should be auto. We just want to make sure that it's not too far close to the top. So 15 pixels from the top, and then everything else can be auto. Just refresh that. Very good. And then now we need to do our sort of padding. So, okay, let's do that. So for padding, we want the top padding to be 0. And then everything else can actually be 10 pixels. You just don't want anything to have a top padding at all. Let's save that. And let's actually, since that's a very minor thing, let's start adding our borders. So we're gonna basically copy the same effect for our borders and also our border radius. So there's a lot of copy and paste in there. That's why I like this assignment, because you'll find that once you get part of it done, there's a lot of copy and pasting. So we're just gonna copy and paste the same border radius and the same border styles for everything else. Except now in this case, we're gonna give the bottom border a white color, and also the left border a white color. And you should see why that makes sense. If you look at the original image, the bottom border has a white color, and then the left border has that white color. So we're going to do that. So we're going to make the left white, FFF. And then we're going to make the bottom also white, FFF. Let's refresh that. Very good. You can't see it. It's very subtle right now. Yeah, I think it's there. We just can't see it because it's very subtle. So, okay, very good. Now, let's give, that's probably actually all we need to do with that. No, let's give it a display of block. Because we don't want it to be like changing size. Display block basically means it's going to be a block. It's not going to move in line with everything else. So very good. So now it's in the middle of the actual um, the gray area. So which is our calculator. So now let's just make the text. Whenever the text is displayed, we'll deal with that later on. So we'll focus on that later on. Now let's do the box shadowing actually. So this is the first time we're going to actually apply box shadowing. And again, let's just review. So we're going to give it an inset shadow. We're going to stack two shadows here. We're going to do an inset, 1 pixel. So 1 pixel horizontal, 1 pixel vertical, and then 5 pixel blur. And then we're going to give it a color of traditional black, and then 0.57 transparency, like 57% transparency. That's going to be our top, our actual. Let's just save that and see what that looks like. So you see what I'm trying to do. So that's going to be our inner shadow. And I'm trying to match this again. So you can see that's our inner shadow. Now we want to add a shadow on top of that. That's going to be our sort of like shiny effect shadow. That little line, that line in the middle that gives like a shiny effect. I'm trying to create that now. And I'm going to use additional shadow to create that line in the middle. So I'm going to do inset because I want it to be inside the 0 pixels. And I want it to be 20 pixels from the top. So I'll do negative 20 pixels for my vertical offset. And then I want it to be very minimally blurry. So I'll just like 0.7 pixels for the blur. And then I'll give it a color of gray. 150, 150, 150, 150, 150. And then I'll do 0.2 for the opacity of the gray. Let me save that. And there you go. You see that little line there? It gives it that like shiny effect. So yeah. Anyway, okay. I think that looks very good. I think we can move on to the buttons now, which are going to be the biggest, going to add the most dramatic effect to this. So let's go ahead and style the buttons. To grab the buttons, I believe we use the ID of button. Or no, we use class of button. So all of the buttons have a class of button. Okay, very good. And then the digits have a additional class of digits. Right, let's do that. So let's style the buttons first. Again, because it's class, I'm using a dot, not a hashtag or a pound sign. And for the buttons, I want to do, I want them to be a width of 40 pixels, 42 pixels. 42 pixels, and I want them to be a height of 42 pixels also, because they're square. And then I want them to, let me just see what that looks like really quickly. Boom. See, that has a big dramatic effect, and it's going to automatically scale everything else because all of that is inside the container. So it's going to fit inside everything else when I do that. So all the buttons are instantly changed to a height of 42 pixels and a width of 42 pixels. Now I can go ahead and add like, let me add a margin so they're not so close to each other. 2 pixels, just all the way around. Let me save that. Very good, very good. And then I want this to be I want them to be blocked also. I want them to be display block because if I right now, if I move this, I bet you these buttons will move around. Oh, you can't really see that well. Maybe I can leave it alone for now. Um, Let me just see if I display inline block. Maybe it's not necessary. Yeah, it's not really necessary. So okay, I'll leave it off for now. The less CSS we have, the better. Um, but I do want to give them a border radius because it's too sharp. For the border radius, I want it to be the same 4 pixels. Yeah, let's see what that looks like. Very good, very good. It's looking good. And I want the font size to be bigger. I want the buttons, the actual text to be like bigger. So I'll change the font size to be 16 pixels. Very good. That's looking good. And I want the text to be bold also. So I'll change the font weight to bold. I spelled weight wrong. Refresh. Very good. Very good. That's looking good. Um, I think that's basically it for the button. Now I want to actually style the digits differently. I want the digits to have their own unique style. So to grab the digits, I'll just use the class digits. That's what the class we gave them. And I want the color of the digits to now be a different, like gray. So I want the text to be like I'll just use 818181818. Oh, 181818. Yeah, that's fine. You see what that looks like? It's very subtle, but that is a gray. And then I want the background color of the buttons to be different. I want it to be a different gray. I want it to be like EB, EB, EB. EB, EB, EB. See what that looks like. Very good. It's like a little bit of a darker gray. And I want to copy the same border top effects that I did with I believe it was the calculator or the top the actual that whole like calculator itself, the outer calculator. I want to use those same borders. So I'll just grab this and I'll paste it with my digits. And I believe, let me save that. Very good. That should create the effect that I want. And now I want the digits to also have a border radius. Let me give them additional border radius. I don't think that might be necessary because they already have a border radius. Let me see if that has. So I think they already have a border radius. I don't know if that's gonna add an additional effect. Yeah, that's not doing anything. So, because we already gave them a border radius with the button under the button property anyway. So now let's do a box shadow. So for the box shadow, I want to basically match this shadowing around the buttons. So that's a little bit tricky. I'm going to basically use 2 shadows, and I want the line in between it also. To create that line in between, I'm going to use 2 shadows stacked on top of each other. I'll do the first one first, or the outer shadow first. So for that, I'll do like a 0 pixel horizontal offset, 0 pixel um, also vertical offset, and then I'll just do 2 pixels blur, and then I'll do RGBA 57%. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, very good. You can see it does give that effect that we have in the original. And now let's go ahead and add our inset shadow. Want another shadow inset. 0 pixel horizontal, -20 from the top. And then just barely like any blur. And then RGBA gray, 150. 150, and then just 20% opacity on that. Let's save that and see what that looks like. Very good. So that calculator is looking good. Now we have that like shiny effect. Um, we created that shiny effect successfully. And the last thing we'll probably do for the digits is we'll give it a text shadow because I want the text to look like it's inside. Let me show you what that means. Let me zoom in very like a lot so you can see what I'm trying to do. So now you notice that the text on the buttons is just kind of like flat. I want it to have like a depth effect, as you can see on this image. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but on the original image, the text looks like it's actually sinking into the button. I wanted to give it that like sink in effect. So to create that sink in effect for the text, I'm going to use a text shadow. Text shadow has no inset. So I'm doing something a little bit advanced. So to give it the same effect as an inset, text shadow does not have an inset property, but it does allow you to stack. So I'm going to stack shadows using a text shadow to create that inset property. And this is a little bit advanced, so just basically copy what I'm doing to create the same effect. I'm going to give it a 0 pixel, 0.5 pixel. For text shadow, it's the same, except there's no like spread. It's just like horizontal offset, vertical offset, and then blur. So I'll give it a 0 pixel horizontal offset, 0.5 pixel vertical offset, and then 0.5 pixel blur. And then I'll stack another one on top of that with just like no horizontal, no vertical, no spread at all, but I'll make that one a black. And the reason why is I'll show you later on. And then the final one I'll stack on top is also going to be, well, I forgot to give that first one a color. I'll make the first one white. And then the second one is going to be sort of like an inner shadow. I'll make that black. And then the top is going to be like a, or this is going to be like a shadow that's coming off of the left. This shadow is going to be coming off of the right. You'll see what I'm trying to describe. Again, 0.5 pixels, and then also white. And this is going to have an effect of stacking 3 shadows on top of each other and making it look like this thing is actually sinking into the button. The text is sinking into the button. You see what it did? So now it looks like the text is sinking into the button. Because basically what we did was we gave it like you can't see the black shadow, which is like on top of this first initial white shadow. So the white shadow is sort of like let me zoom in a little bit more. We created like a white shadow that's coming off the edge, and then another one that's coming off the other edges, and then a black shadow that's sort of inside. You can sort of see that black shadow inside of this like circle for the 9. Anyway, it's a little bit complicated to explain, but that's how we add that depth effect by stacking shadows with our text shadow. A very like tricky thing. So it's kind of a hack, but just basically this is the hack we'll use to create a depth effect with since there's no inset option for text shadow. All right, very good. So now we'll look at our math buttons, which is like the C, the equal sign, the time sign, the multiplication, the division sign. And the way we access the math buttons, I think we use just the property math buttons, that class math buttons. So we'll access that by using the class selector, math buttons. I'm just trying to go fast a little bit. So for the math buttons, we're going to do the same thing almost for the regular buttons, or for the digits, except we're going to change. So we can just copy a lot of this. But we're going to change the color, of course. And the math buttons are going to be, you can see on this, they're going to be black. All of them are going to be black except for the clear button. So let's just quickly, the background color for the math buttons is going to be not this light gray. We're going to make it like 40, 43, 43, 43. And then we want the text shadow to be the same, I believe. No, the text shadow is going to be different. We won't even play with that right now. We'll just focus on the other stuff. So we want the top. Um, the math buttons have a different shadowing, if you notice. So um, it looks very similar, actually. Let me see. So the top is white. Um, yeah, we can probably get away with leaving the math buttons the same shadowing. Um, and then we want the text color actually to be white because obviously the text color, the buttons themselves are black, the text is going to be white. So that's different. So let's change that color. The text is going to be white. And then we want the margin to be a little bit different for them. So we want terrible, the top margin to be 2 pixels, the bottom one to be 2 pixels, the bottom, the no, the top to be 2 pixels, the right to be 2 pixels, the bottom is going to be 6 pixels, and then the left is going to be 2 pixels. We want that to be our margin. Let's go ahead and refresh that. Very good. So the buttons are a little bit bigger. Very good. And then I think that's everything for the buttons, the math buttons. I think that's everything for the math buttons. And we just have to change the inset now. So we want to create the same inset property for the text of the map buttons, but they're white. So what we're basically going to do is we're going to use the same sort of logic, but instead of this being white, this is going to be black. And instead of this being black, it's going to be white. It's just going to be the opposite. And if this, instead of this being white, it's going to be black. And then when we save that, it sort of creates the same inset property, if you can see it, or inset effect. Okay, I think that's basically it for the map buttons. Next, we'll style the clear button, which is red. And that's the only one that sort of has its own unique style. We'll just copy the CSS for the map buttons, and we'll access the clear button by using what do we use for a selector? I think it's just clear button. Yeah, it's clear button. So I'll just quickly copy that. And then it's going to be an ID, it's going to be an ID, not a class. And then for the clear button, I want the color also to be white. I don't need to do this, I don't believe. My margin. Yeah, I need to do that. The text shadow is going to be very, very strange. So it's going to be different because it's a red button. So let me just show you again. The clear button is red. So that means that little line has to be like red. And then I think the shadowing is going to be also affected by that because it's going to be like a pink shadow on this. So what I'm going to do is I'll do the border top as for this color, instead of like spending time finding it, I'll just tell you what it is. It's going to be FF8484. So the first one is going to be red, maximum red, and then the remaining is going to be just like a gray, 8484. So it's going to be maximum red. It's going to basically create like a pink for us, maximum red, and then 8484, like a gray for the green and the blue. And the same is going to be true for the right one. I want it to be maximum red, and then 84 for the blue and the green. And then I want the bottom to be like deep red. I don't want it to be like pink. I want it to be deep red, 80 red, and then I want the rest of it to be black. And I want it to be deep red again. And then the rest of it to be black. If I save that, I refresh. Oh, I forgot to change the background color. Background color is going to be red of like a D2 is going to be the red, and then everything else is going to be black, like maximum red, and then none for everything else. Very good, very good. You can see it's already adding that effect. We just need to change like that line. It's looking very close to being good. ah, for the sake of time, I might just leave that as is. I'll let you play around with it. That looks close enough for me. We just need to fix the inset. So let me just zoom in. We need to fix that text. We want it to like sink in. We want that C to sink into the button. So to create that effect, we'll do the same thing again, but now we have to change our colors. So for the first one, we're gonna make that like a gray, 030303. And then we'll make the second one, or actually I'll make that red. Sorry, not gray. I want it to be red. I'll do maximum red, and then nothing for everything else. And then I'll leave this white actually. And then for the last one, I'll make it maximum red also. FF 0000. Now let me save that and see if it does it. Ah, barely. It barely creates that effect for me. You can't see it, but it's hard to see it. Anyway, that's not a big deal. When we zoom out, it's just a little bit too, anyway, that's fine. That's fine. For the sake of time, we'll leave it. But from this distance, you can see that it does look like it's sinking in. It does look like it's sinking into the button. Anyway, so that's good for the clear button. So the very last thing we'll do is add a hover effect. Notice right now when we hover over the buttons, it doesn't do anything. And we want the buttons to actually look, everything is working fine. Oh, I forgot to we want the text to be at the far right. So let me go ahead and fix that real quick. So how do we do that? Let's go back to display. To display, we want this text to be positioned to the right. So whenever we type, we want that text to appear to the right. So we want to do that by setting the text alignment property, text align right. Let's just check if that works. Text align right. So save it. Did I save it? Refresh. Okay, there it goes. Yeah. So now it looks like an actual calculator when we type. And we want the text to be a little bit bigger also. So let's make the text a lot bigger. Let's give it a font size of 28 pixels. And now if we refresh, very good, very good. That's looking more like a calculator. Very good, very good, very good. Okay. And I think that's fine. Now let's go ahead and progress to these like map buttons are bothering me. I think we made a mistake with the map buttons. Let's do for the map buttons, let's do this. Because it doesn't look like the image. Let's do for the top, let's do gray. And then for the right, let's also do gray. And then for the bottom and left, let's do also gray, but like a darker gray, 181818, and then 181818. Now let's look at that. Very good. That looks a lot better. That looks a lot better. Okay, very good. And now let's add the hover effects on the buttons really quickly. So we're gonna do a multiple selector because everything that has like a button, everything that's a button is gonna have that hover effect. So we'll just do digits. And if you remember, hover is a pseudo property. So hover, or we'll just do like that. And then also math buttons. Oh, I forgot to use the class selector for everything that's a digit, everything that's a math button. I believe it's a math button. Yep. And then we want that to be whenever we hover over it. And then finally, we want to grab all the clear button, that one clear button also, which is has the ID of clear button on hover. And now we want to style this. We want basically to say, whenever the mouse hovers over this stuff, we want the background color to change a little bit. We want the background color to be red, maximum red, and then like BA75. So it's a weird color anyway. You'll see what it looks like. And then box shadow is going to be similar. Um, we're going to stack box shadows because the box shadows are originally stacked. We're going to invert the box shadows. So we're going to do 0 pixel horizontal, 0 pixel vertical, 2 pixel blur, and then we want that same color, FFBA75. And then we want to stack an inset shadow on top of that. So we're basically inverting. Notice how originally for the digits, well, let me see. You can't really see it actually. Whenever we hover over this, okay. You still can't really see it. Anyway, let's just type it out, see what happens. 0 pixels, negative 20 pixels, and then 1 pixel. And then we want this to be a color of maximum red, and then 80, 80. Oh, 80, 0, 0. Let's just see what that looks like so far. Okay, very good, very good. So it's turning it like orange. Um, we don't want it to turn orange, let me think. Hmm. Okay, anyway, let's continue. Let's change